Good evening, everyone. I am the Mad Computer Scientist. On this channel, I discuss math, computer science, and technology topics that are of interest to me. However, once a week, I do something a little bit different. I go through videos that I think use faulty logic to make their points. Sometimes they can be my own, and I do encourage the people watching this channel to send me videos that they think I should cover. Tonight, however, we're going to watch a podcast that features Terrence Howard, hosted by Ben Carson. Sorry, wrong Carson, Billy Carson. Now, Billy Carson is, as far as I can tell, a grifter who makes his money on the New Age movement, and mostly I've avoided him simply because nothing he says is really unique to him. And the one idea I did come across of his that had any relevance to this channel was not his idea. As far as I can tell, it originated with Ben Van Kerkwyk, another conspiracy theorist. However, since Terrence Howard has spent most of the summer promoting bad math, I think it would be interesting to see what he has to say. Now, we're going to do some tech checks briefly, just to make sure everything is running the way I'd like it to. So give me a second here while we share the screen. And we need to close some stuff. All right, here we are. We want to full screen this. That was not the full screen button. There we go. And let's see, and we need to make sure I am on my channel just so I can do the check. Check. Give me a second here. All right, we're on my channel now. Now we need to go to, excuse me, where we need to be. Okay, we do have sound coming through. Now let's the video play a little bit. All right, looks like we don't have sound. All right, something is wrong here. Give me a second and we'll fix it. And we also are coming through the wrong speakers. That's interesting. All right, now that we're coming through the right speakers, give me a few seconds and we'll see if we can get it. Well, it's most likely my fault. Give me a second.
All right, let's see. Let me move this one out. Let me try to get them up here.
Okay, that should be enough. Oh, it's really echoey. All right.
There we go.
We have what we need. So, for those of you who don't know who Terrence Howard is, he's a Hollywood actor. I think he's a pretty good one, but he thinks he has people to teach his inability to do basic math to. We're going to see some of what it is tonight, but we're going to skip like the first half hour of the podcast because that was Billy Carson reading through his books.
There's so many things in this world that needs to have a voice and be spoken about. Yeah. And it doesn't seem to have any place in our common world, to where they mention that, okay, everybody should talk and should have a voice. But when someone starts speaking, the first thing they want to do is shut them up, because they start asking questions and the questions challenge the fundamentals that everybody sits on. But
there is nothing wrong with challenging the fundamentals everyone sits on. The problem is you have to understand why those fundamentals are what they are, and you have to make sure you're right before you challenge them, and that's where you go wrong.
If fundamentals are being challenged, then maybe you need new fundamentals, because a true foundation, you don't challenge that.
Yeah, facts. So, that's what's happening, and that's why I thought it was important to get you in front of the people that I call my people leaders. I don't have followers, I have leaders. Because these people they vibe with your information, they're vibing with your knowledge, and I believe to me it's innovative and it's fresh, it's refreshing. And
that's probably because they didn't pass basic math either.
What is science, after all? It's to explore the matters of interest from a level of logic and analyzation, and actually to try to break those laws and see how they can be broken or find ways to go around them. And if we've never done that, we wouldn't even be on this.
Wait, science is not about breaking laws of any kind. Usually, it's about finding out what is true.
The screen right now, connecting with each other via satellites and cell towers. So it took somebody to challenge the status quo to make this technology even happen. And that's just the standard process that
No, it didn't take someone to challenge the status quo. It took someone to invent new technology. And in some cases, new math to represent what that technology is doing. Mr. Howard is not George Boole.
It takes for innovation to happen. Unfortunately, in this human civilization, it takes a lot of challenging the status quo and going against the mainstream. I mean, heck, even the people that became the founding fathers of America, they were outlaws. I mean, you have to go against them to create something.
Yeah, you can't ask for freedom. If you're asking for it and they give it to you, it's never given to you. You have
absolute facts, man.
Freedom of information and freedom to live our lives according to truth. You know, that should not be.
We're going to skip ahead a little bit because this isn't relevant.
Absolute facts. And let me just, the thing that I notice about some of these interviews is they ask you a question, and as soon as you get into the groove of trying to create the answer to that question and come up to the epiphany moment where we can go, aha, another question comes in, or you get cut off, and then it gets sidetracked, and we never got back to.
Well, the main reason he gets cut off is because he's wrong and needs to be corrected.
Allow you to finish some of those great answers that you were giving and to give your perspective.
I have seen enough Terrence Howard to know he doesn't give great answers. A good example of where he just goes totally off the rails is when he was at the Oxford Student Union and he was trying to correct math students who are actually learning math on why the square root of 1 is rational. It isn't rational, and Euclid, you are not, Terrence Howard.
Perspective and your point of view on some of this scientific rigor. And I think that was a real discredit to the interview. I think that a person should be able to speak and to get their point across to the fullest. And then you go back and forth from there. But, you don't ask a person a question and then cut them off. I think the best way is to allow a person to get their point across. I mean, if you're in a relationship and, the biggest problem in arguments is that no one wants to hear the other person talk. You shut your wife up or your boyfriend up or your husband up, whatever, and you guys are going back and forth and nothing gets solved. And it turns into a toxic relationship. And that's what happens.
Again, this is not relevant.
They haven't innovated any system. They've just regurgitated things that's been said for thousands of years. And
Terrence, the reason why no one has innovated what 1 × 1 equals is because math isn't about discovering new technologies. It's about discovering relationships in the language of numbers that we have defined. And the reason why no one is challenging what 1 × 1 equals is because most people understand that the definition of multiplication in math is not the same one as the one you are using. It doesn't mean to make bigger in math.
And unfortunately, those things are wrong.
Well, yes, there is something wrong in what you're saying, Howard, but it's not basic math.
We just filed a new patent for a neutrino gun.
Oh, for heaven's sakes. Patenting sci-fi inventions that don't exist doesn't mean you're a genius. And you're about to say something that I'm pretty sure is also wrong here about nuclear power.
That will speed up. I did this with Jeff Yee, a mathematician that I work with. But it will speed up the radioactive decay almost 5 to 10 times.
Wow.
But what it will do inside of a nuclear power plant is actually create a circumstance that it creates more energy because it's breaking down creating the radioactive decay, speeding that process up. And there's another process, but all of these patents, beyond that one, that hasn't been granted yet.
Okay, we need to stop Terrence Howard here because I don't think he realized how stupid what he just said is. Now, I could be wrong, but I am pretty sure you do not want to speed up the rate of nuclear reactions in a nuclear reactor. If you do that, you end up with something called a nuclear bomb, Mr. Howard. There's a reason why there are control rods in a nuclear reactor, so the rate of reactions doesn't get too high. Now, you can have more reactions without it causing a catastrophic failure, but I don't think what you're proposing would be good for anyone. Essentially, what you are going to cause if you do this, and you're not smart enough to, Mr. Howard, rather, I should say you don't have enough information to create something like this because you've never actually learned engineering, is you're essentially saying you're going to create something that causes more nuclear meltdowns, as if we needed more 3 Mile Islands, Chernobyls, and Fukushimas.
Yeah. You know, we just filed that 3 weeks ago, but all my other patents have been granted.
No, they have not. There have been plenty of people who debunked Terrence Howard's patents. The one he brought up earlier, his VR patent, was actually invented before he was born.
So for them to sit up and try and say, I don't have these patents, you can't take linchpin out of the sky.
And to be fair, he does have some patents. Just not as many as he's claiming. It's about 11 or so, I think.
You can't take AR, VR world away. You can't.
You didn't invent it. It was invented, or rather virtual reality was invented in 1968. You were born in 1969. Do the math, Howard, or at least have someone who can do math do it for you and realize that you weren't born yet. There was 1 year to go until your birth.
You know, you're living by these things, but I think that it did not serve their narrative and their agenda that this self-educated Black man, you know, was able to do this. But it should make sense, seeing that, you know, every other race has six DNA, 6 DNA sequences, except the descendants of Africa, African descendants. And I hate using the term Africa because it should be called Alkebulon, because Africa means sunny horror based on the Latin word.
Alkebulon.
Yeah.
Very factual.
We should be, but anyone that's from Africa, we have 9 DNA series compared to 6, which provide
DNA series of what? This is totally meaningless.
Provides a greater potential for genius. You sit there and wonder how is it that this race of people were able to survive, you know, not just 500 years of slavery. You know, since the Talmud came out in 500 AD, there's a book called The Ebb and Flow of History. And it
when did the Talmud come out? I don't think that's right either. All right, let's take a check. Let's fact check that for a second. It was written between the 3rd and 6th centuries. Okay, that's not too far off. We'll let it go.
Talks about the Jewish Talmud and, you know, the stories that the sages added to biblical stories. And that was the reason that Black people were considered, they were considered less than humanity because of what was said in the Talmud. And that's why I mentioned that book, The Ebb.
What you needed to say, and perhaps what you meant to say, was that the Bible was used as a justification for slavery. However, I don't think the people of the ancient Middle East had the same concept of race that we do today, so this isn't a valid comparison.
And flow of history on page 34, if you take a look at it, that was the first Negrophobic text.
Page 34 of the Talmud? For heaven's sakes. A book published as widely as a religious book cannot be referenced by solely the page number.
Noah and Shem, Japheth, and Ham. And they said that Ham must have gone in there, and because he had to pierce at his father in the darkness of night, his eyes had to be buggered out, you know, and since it was dark, he had to have dark skin. They were going to curse his children.
This is
get full credit for a lot of the work that we did because, of course, you know, the plantation owner would take the credit, but we were the inventors nonetheless. So we have incredible, innovative minds, and I think the perception of the world is they show on TV people in the ghettos fighting each other and people in the ghettos, you know, getting in trouble.
Also irrelevant.
These things, all this stuff would be in someone else's hands under someone else's name right as we speak. But I'm waiting for that MIT and Harvard world, everyone they're associated with, to make their innovations or come out.
MIT, an organization not known for ever making any innovations whatsoever.
With their new understanding and try and say that it's not based upon, the information that I shared with them. But
Mr. Howard, no one is going to base anything on any information you shared with them, other than maybe I can say I actually did base one of my videos on the information you've publicly shared, where I came to the conclusion that you probably did not pass third grade math. For those of you who wonder what I'm talking about, he has a book called 1 × 1 = 2, which is available on his website and you can download it. He has a story in there about how he was challenging the teacher on the square root of 2 being a rational number.
Everyone out there, the audience needs to understand we're at the very end of this crumbling system, and we need the knowledge that is being shared in order to survive.
And I'm so glad you don't have a huge ego, Mr. Howard.
And be able just to survive the next couple of years of what's going to happen to us.
Yeah, definitely. I've been looking heavily into the flower of life pattern for a very long time. The flower of life pattern is a very ancient pattern. I've seen it in ancient Egypt, in ancient temples like the Osirian, which is so old. It's probably, in my estimation, somewhere around 30 to 40,000 years old. It's etched into the stone columns at the Osirian, which is lower than the Temple of Seti. In other words, the Temple of Seti is built up here, and beneath it on the side, you have the temple.
I think he means the Temple of Set.
The Osirian temple, or the Temple of Osiris, which means that it's so much older that it was built back then at a much lower level. And as time passes on, they keep building more temples on top of more ancient sites. And inside of one of those, on those stone columns at the base,
I am pretty sure no one in Egypt is building more Egyptian temples.
Inside this thing, which is really not a temple to me, it looks more like a machine. It looks like an energetic machine that ran on hydropower. But on one of these columns, you see multiple flowers of life, but they're not painted on, which is or hieroglyphed. They actually appear to be atomically.
Hieroglyphed? Hieroglyph was the name for the system of writing. Did you mean carved?
Etched into the fabric of the columns themselves,
yeah.
Which is in some way was done that is just, it's mind-boggling and mind-blowing. And it's amazing that all ancient civilizations have an imprint or knowledge of the flower of life and the unparalleled power that it actually.
It's a pretty geometric shape that's easy to make relatively. It's not some sort of ancient knowledge.
Actually possesses. You want to vibe on the flower of life a little bit?
Yeah, well, that was every discovery that I've made, all of those patents, they were all based off of that flower, because I wanted to understand where the fundamentals that came from.
The patents he has been granted are mostly for children's toys and jewelry.
The platonic solids, where they had gotten those from. And some of the earliest stuff that I could find was they took it from the flower of life, and they drew straight lines where the circles overlap each other, and they averaged the space out. And that's why I said the platonic solids are approximations and averages. But the
platonic solids are actually idealized states, or rather idealized representations of shapes, not approximations.
The being that was instructing me,
wait, the being that was instructing you?
He said, why don't you just take the individual pieces that make up the flower and put it together based on universal ratios? So I put 4 of the triangular pieces together, and it gave me the tetrahedron, which was the geometry of hydrogen. And they gave me the patents to it. And then I was like, okay,
you cannot patent shapes. You need to drop this talking point.
But if I put 8 of them together? And then that became the Huntian, and it became the strong force because it had 8 contractive poles.
A shape cannot become the strong force.
And only 6 magnetic poles, which meant that it had a greater attractor, whereas the tetrahedron had 4 attractive poles and 4 repulsive poles. So that would be the weak nuclear force.
Can I please get some ranch dressing to go with that word salad?
And I was like, as I started putting the rest of the pieces together, I was like, look, what happens if I put 6 bubbles together, which meant taking more pieces and putting them together. But I built all of those models based off of universal ratios and the flower of life. Literally everything has been the flower of life. So I believe that whoever left that molecularly carved into those columns and all around the world, they left this here for us because they knew with this knowledge, it would give us a fundamental base that every advanced civilization in the universe is able to use. And with that, we can manipulate not only matter, but we can manipulate, we have the ability to affect cause. Yes. We're no longer limited to the effects of nature. We now can partake in the cause of it. And that's why I was so excited, because if hydrogen makes up 90%.
You know, the first couple of times I heard Mr. Howard, I thought he might be in a manic state, and he is doing little to remove that assumption from me.
9% of the universe, and we now have the geometry of hydrogen. That means we
have the geometry of hydrogen. Well, we can actually somewhat see molecules now, I think, with electron microscopes of high enough power, but I don't think it looks anything like your shape.
Manipulate 99% of what takes place in the universe. That makes us God.
We can manipulate 99.9% of what takes place in the universe. We don't even see most of the universe.
Yeah.
And no, we are not gods.
Yeah.
If we utilize information, but why are they so hell-bent on not utilizing it? Because these wave conjugations that come from there, there's new axioms and postulates to be written from them that would make all the other axioms and postulates or these assumptions disappear.
First of all, axioms is mostly a mathematical term, and you can write new mathematical axioms if you're coming up with a new math, but your new math has to be consistent. That is why no one accepts teleology, Mr. Howard. It is inconsistent, and it tries to rewrite already existing rules of math.
There's no assumptions with the flower of life when it's opened properly. It provides supersymmetrical.
You can't open a geometric shape. It's just a drawing.
System. I pulled 3 different symmetrical systems from that flower, and I kept it quiet while I was doing it. My wife looked at me like I was crazy. You don't have to patent everything.
I can't imagine why anyone would be looking at you like you were crazy, Mr. Howard. I'm certainly not doing that now.
Everything. And I was like, yes, you do. Because if you don't, they don't believe that it's yours.
Yeah.
You know, and Eric Weinstein went on to say, well, I'm Pierce Morgan. Yeah, I think, 99% of what he said was BS.
Well, to be fair, Eric Weinstein, who is himself a conspiracy theorist, just like you are, was wrong about that, because 99% of what you said was indeed incorrect, but that's not the full percentage of what you said that was incorrect. I would say it was closer to 99.9%. At least the stuff that wasn't gibberish.
But there's this 1%, and he says, but I'm not sure it's his. I'm not sure it's his. Well,
yes, that's because he was trying to be generous and pretend the drone you said you made yourself, that you actually did a contest to get people designed for you, was a brilliant idea. And it's not. Plenty of engineers have looked at it and said it's a terrible idea that doesn't work well. Plus, you think these drones, which use propellers that push air, can go into space.
I think the patents say that it's mine.
Oh, yeah. The patents are yours. They're all yours.
Yes, and a lot of Edison's patents said it was his invention too. Why? Because that was the agreement with the people who worked for him, that the stuff they invented would be produced under his name. This didn't mean Edison invented nothing. It just means a lot of things we give it credit for weren't Edison's inventions. And this has nothing to do with him stealing Tesla's inventions, by the way. There's no need to go into that tonight.
Sure.
And I'm here not trying to rule over anything, but I feel like I'm
No, you're just trying to get us all to accept your version of the one's timetable is accurate, even though it's just adding one essentially.
I'm a keeper of the garden. That's all I am. I'm here tending the garden. And anybody that wants to come and take the
But the garden died 10 years ago.
fruits from the flower of life, fruit from the tree of life, they can come. They're welcome in here. I did the book for free, but everything is based on that flower of life that's behind you. That's all it needs.
Right.
They don't the rest of it, but they need to get rid of the straight lines or these imaginary projections, linear projections that do not exist and just creates problems within
linear projections. I think that actually is a thing, but it doesn't mean what he thinks it does.
Mathematical world.
Right, which is one of the reasons, those lines are some of the reasons why we haven't achieved cold fusion and many other technologies that we should.
Oh, for heaven's sakes. The fact that we haven't accepted Terrence Howard's math is not why we haven't achieved cold fusion. Terrence Howard's math does not produce any new technology. It doesn't even produce anything new that we can apply to our daily lives. We already have something that does what Terrence Howard's math does. It's called adding one to any number.
Be privy to right now. One thing I took the flower of life, if you take the flower of life and turn it into a three-dimensional object, like take it away from 2D and turn it into 3D, you can fit 64 tetrahedrons within these axes that exist within the flower of life. And then they connect on a vertice, which creates something called the vector equilibrium. And then at the center of that vector equilibrium, theoretically, is unparalleled, unlimited power. We're talking about 0-point energy, which exists at every Planck unit.
Great. I was wondering how to get my power level up to over 9,000.
In space-time throughout the known universe. And we just need to tap into that. I think some people have tried to create technologies that could tap into it. Have you looked into anything with that?
Well, what they're
Please learn the laws of thermodynamics. Please take a middle school level science class.
lacking is the angles of incidence. They're still trying to approach these things.
The angle of incident has to do with light, and it has nothing to do with anything Terrence Howard is talking about.
From a Cartesian base. And
a Cartesian base, what do you mean? Do you mean a Cartesian coordinate system? I guarantee you, the thing we're all watching this on right now relies on a Cartesian coordinate system in order to display anything.
For the audience, I say Cartesian, it means orthogonal.
Orthogonal.
Or Euclidean space. They use these 90-degree angles. That's the basis of their entire understanding. But because
Euclidean math is not the basis of our understanding. We have a lot more math and even non-Euclidean geometries that have come along since Euclid. It's time for you to catch up, Mr. Howard.
that is not how the universe behaves. That's not how matter arranges itself. It doesn't arrange itself according to 45-degree angles or 90-degree angles. None of that stuff makes sense in the universe.
And you are someone who thinks that you can't have curves on a graph for some reason. I'm going to show you right now why you're wrong and you can have curves in Cartesian space. Give me a second here. I'm going to go to desmos.com/calculator so you can run this experiment at home. Not really an experiment, just a demonstration. So give me a second here. I need to stop sharing this screen. Share the new screen. All right, we want Desmos. Share. And I'm going to show something that will blow Mr. Howard's mind. Hey, look! There are curves in that Cartesian space. In fact, we can even have different shaped curves. There are curves in that S shape, too. Maybe, just maybe, get a graphing calculator before you say things that are that stupid. Or if you can't afford a graphing calculator for some reason, go to the site I just went to. All right, back to Terrence Howard. Oh, I'm letting a lot of mistakes get by because there's stuff I just don't know. But it's either out of out of my area, or the last time I brought Dr. Tapioca Weasel into comment, it broke his brain.
It actually becomes
Technically, it broke my brain too, because by the end of the night, I was agreeing that 1 to the power of 3 equals the absolute value of pi, which
irrational.
Honestly I knew better.
Like a straight line is irrational in
A straight line is irrational? That doesn't make any sense.
curved space, the same way that curved space is irrational
A straight line is irrational in curved space. No, it isn't.
in flat plane in Euclidean space. That's so if they would utilize the actual pieces that come from the flower, if they would do the mimicry that the universe does, it doesn't
do the mimicry that the universe does? Do you even know what those words mean? Mimicry means the universe is copying something.
It doesn't rebuild the wheel every damn time. It just takes that same wheel and apply it. Plug
The universe doesn't build anything.
it in, plug it in, plug it in. You don't have to be redundant. You don't have to do all this superfluous stuff to reach something. You just have to use the proper tools. But
all right, I know there are some other people that have really given Billy Carson a hard time about his pronunciation. I am not going to do that. He does need to learn how to pronounce words, but mostly I think he learned a lot of these words by reading them.
what we've been able to accomplish with our propulsion system, we're getting.
You've gotten drones to fly around in the air. It's nothing impressive.
More energy out of it than we're putting into it.
Mm-hmm.
That's that so-called 0 point energy, but it's by using the proper geometries. What I shared with them about beryllium and its ability to...
Oh, for heaven's sakes. You said beryllium could be used to perform electrolysis on water. No, it can't. Nor can you use the sound of beryllium to do that. Electrolysis is separating oxygen and hydrogen by passing electricity through water. And the reason you can't use beryllium to do any of that is because beryllium is the only alkali metal that does not react violently with water.
Draw in oxygen, or it's an attractor for oxygen to break oxygen from hydrogen. That no matter how much they try to silence it up, that's real.
No one is trying to silence that. No one is using it because it doesn't work.
Right. The -2 and the +2 they're going to mate. And then
the -2 and the +2 are going to mate and do what? If you're going to multiply -2 times 2, that is, despite your stance on negative numbers, -4. If you're going to add them, the result is 0. Because they are additive inverses. Another term you need to learn, Terrence.
Whatever's left out, they're going to be left out. So they can attempt to try and deaden the knowledge, but the people that were supposed to hear it, they heard it. And the whole reason I said it was so that people can survive and take care of their families when everything goes to hell.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah. There's so much power in this. Even you're talking about creating propulsion.
Terrence, if things go bad, I guarantee you I will not be using anything you promote in a post-apocalyptic scenario. There are people who have the skills I would need, and you're not one of them.
That can produce more energy than you're putting into it. There's something called an M drive. I don't know if you've heard of the M drive yet.
The M drive, that's still mixed with string theory, that whole 5 things. No, I may be wrong.
Okay, well, the M drive is actually for propulsion. So it's a propulsion system that utilizes a microwave that bounces around inside the cone. And
I don't think this is correct, but what he's about to explain about who came up with it is.
And at first, everybody scoffed. They laughed. Scientists told them, this will never work. You guys are wasting funds. We're going to pull your funding. And they got this thing to actually work.
No, they did not. It is a entirely theoretical concept for a warp engine that I'm pretty sure does not work the way he's describing it.
China actually tested it first ahead of us because the American scientists were too busy laughing at the inventors. And then China launched.
China did not launch it either. A lot of people think the Mexican physicist who came up with it is wrong.
Went up into space, and they've been testing it in space for some years now. But this bouncing a microwave.
They're testing something in space that has never been invented. That's an interesting claim.
With no fuel around inside of a cone creates propulsion that actually never stops, utilizing nothing but a bouncing microwave. No.
It is impressive how far AI has come. And if Terrence Howard turns out to be artificially intelligent, I would not be surprised.
Chemical rocket fuel, no propellant. And because space has reduced friction or almost no friction, you continue to accelerate until you reach.
Oh, Howard's not going to like that one.
Percent of the speed of light. So there's this. I'm just giving an example of technology that should be far beyond where it's at now, but because of like what's happened to you and many other people, it falls into this bubble of woo woo. But then come to find out this stuff is real and it really does work, and that's kind of
secretly will they'll publicly defame it and then privately go and claim it. Mm-hmm. That's their dance. There's so many advancements in technology that we could have married ourselves to. Mm-hmm. And I say marry because we would have needed to do that to get away from the garbage that we've been doing. But nobody, if we get off of their money, the problem is we're so connected to their gold. We're still doing everything and that's what gives them power and authority over us. If we go back to bartering, if we recognize that.
Oh, for heaven's sakes, going back to bartering would be worse. There's a reason why we developed currency systems. They're not perfect, and we certainly can develop better economic systems than we currently have. Or we can actually implement capitalism the way Adam Smith said it should be implemented and have fewer problems. But going back to bartering isn't going to solve anything.
That the money, the fiat system, is all garbage. And we go to a bartering system of trading goods.
I don't know what happened there.
We lost him temporarily. I'm sure he'll bounce right back in here. But we're having a good discussion, even though it's.
Okay, I guess there were tech issues throughout this stream, so let's see what happens.
It may just a little foggy. We're having a great discussion, so I hope you guys are learning something here tonight.
Yes, I am learning things, but not what I'm supposed to be.
Okay, I was getting bit by those little bitty bugs up there, man.
Oh, man.
I wish I could go inside of my casita, but we've got so much stuff pulling together over there. But in watching the walk that you've taken, for Black people to speak against the Holy Scriptures, to speak against the Bible or question it, that's a hard thing. That's a hard sell, but you bravely walked out and talked about the truth consistently. And I'm of the idea that 6,000 years for the last 1,000 years have been very successful in propagating the history of their forefathers and of who they come from and their gods. Wonderful.
Listen, I am not going to argue with the overall idea behind this point. A lot of history was lost during the colonization process of many countries. That's why we don't know a lot of Mayan history, because the Spanish burned the books.
I love that. But what about our forefathers? What about the gods of our ancestors? Mm-hmm. That has a much richer history and a longer history than just 6,000 years ago. That there are no contradictions regarding, oh God, it didn't cause it to rain.
Okay, we're going to skip this because it's also not relevant.
To help them. There's guides that are waiting to help them, guides in truth. And I had the hardest time accepting that we have spiritual help, because you try and lock that in with a scientific world or an empirical view of reality. And it's an amazing opportunity to be able to relax and let all of that DNA that's been stored inside of you, let that begin to speak. Yeah. Because every time something happened to it.
Let the DNA that's stored inside of you begin to speak? I mean, technically, yeah, DNA is stored inside of you, but how is it going to begin to speak? DNA is a chemical. I mean, this is even worse than the people who try to say DNA is a computer code. And honestly, I would love them to show me at least some kind of proof that DNA itself is Turing complete before I start taking them seriously, or that it can manipulate data.
To that person that the DNA was in,
I might have
there's a
misspelled
chemical
it too.
marker on there. There's an indentation. There's information in there. And so one moment you put yourself in that environment.
Oh, for heaven's sakes. Now he just got on one of my pet peeves. And I don't even think he intended to, because this is something that religious apologists tend to do where I don't think they realize what they're doing, or they're trying to conflate different fields together. But if you're going to use an informatics analogy and have DNA in it, DNA is data, not information. Even in DNA computing systems, which are Turing complete, the DNA itself isn't, because DNA is used as data, which gets processed into information. The difference is information has to be human readable in some way, at least in informatics.
And meditate on it. Those are the things that come to mind. They come to help you. You're not alone. And you have to trust that, because that instinct, where they try and tell you not to listen to it, that instinct is what got you to the egg. It got you to beat out 500 million of your brothers and sisters. You trusted that instinct that got you to the egg.
I really should have had a face-protecting oven mitt for this one. No, Mr. Howard. Human gametes do not have brains. They do not have instinct.
At all costs. So we have to remember to get back to that place, that we're...
Get back to the egg? Okay. I don't think that's possible at this point anymore, but...
There's truth. And the knowledge, whatever accreditation that they have out there, I tell you, it's nonsense.
I don't know why he keeps thinking accreditation is a bad thing, but I think he's annoyed because he doesn't have a degree from an accredited institution that isn't honorary. And to be fair, the fact that I do have a computer science degree doesn't mean anything other than I have a computer science degree. And I graduated with honors.
It's absolutely nonsense, or I wouldn't be able to break their calculator.
Right.
Terrence Howard, your ability to break my calculator has nothing to do with your bad math. Your ability to break my calculator has everything to do with your inability to understand technology, or your ability to throw it against the wall. The thing is, I can get my calculator to show me that the square root of 2 cubed divided by 2 is equal to the square root of 2. I can also get it to show me the square root of 3 cubed divided by 3 is equal to the square root of 3. And the square root of 4 cubed divided by 4 is equal to the square root of 4. In fact, you can do that with all numbers greater than 0. What you have discovered is essentially the laws of exponents.
Wouldn't be able to overturn, their fundamentals, which destroys their accreditation and destroys the authority they have. So it's everything they have. They have to make it to where no one will listen to me. But you
Plenty of people are listening to you. They're just not taking you seriously.
can't ignore the truth.
No.
It's simple, and it makes a point. The people that actually...
Yes, it makes a point. The point it makes isn't what you think it's making. The point it's making is you don't understand basic math.
listen to it and apply it in their life, their life will be changed.
How am I going to apply 1 × 1 = 2 in my life? Seriously. Accreditation, yes, he does.
Forever. I call the truth, an infection. It's a virus, because once you start touching and tasting it, you don't want the manufactured stuff. You want that pure, unadulterated truth, and that's what we're...
Oh, if there are any way I could have Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Murray Jackson, I think that was her name, come back from the grave just to teach you math. Actually, I found a link earlier that I kind of want to put in the chat at the end of this just to show it's like there are people out there who are making real contributions to math that have something in common with Terrence Howard.
And that's what I'm sharing. And I give everybody opportunity to examine the stuff. Take the wave conjugations, take the all shapes, take the linchpins, take them out of the book. I have it in the book. TCOT.
I have read your book. It is one of the greatest pieces of comedic fiction I have ever read. And I am both a fan of Douglas Adams and Terry Pratchett.
Examine them. If they're not a grand unified supersymmetrical system, completely throw it away and go right back to your platonic solids with their discrete symmetry. But if these show.
Yes, and you also think that platonic solids are the root of every university course. In fact, when I took my first Python course, we went over the platonic solids because that's what we need to know how to program. Certainly not the basic control structures that are used by every single functional and object-oriented programming language that are more important to programming than the platonic solids.
A better prediction ability. Like we've been able to predict earthquakes for the last 3 years within 24 hours.
And wait, when have we been able to predict earthquakes? No, we haven't. I do know someone was claiming that, but he was also wrong.
Within a 500-mile area, with our simple equipment. Can you imagine what we'll be able to do? The wave conjugation.
Oh, he's claiming he can predict earthquakes. I have never seen him try. I will have to see if something is up on his website to show that he can.
They predict all distribution of matter. They predict all harmonic notes, and that's where matter occurs, where these harmonies occur. But they predict all of those things. If they applied them, they wouldn't have any of the problems that they have out there. But they'll take 100.
All right, Mr. Howard, I'm going to issue a challenge to you. I want you to show me how your math can solve the P versus NP problem. Go.
Years to apply them. So now we're just building a separate society, and we'll branch off and it'll have our own protection and our own understanding and our own people. It's just calling the collective, whoever is part of the collective, whoever our voices resonate with, it's reach out and let's combine do the work that we were meant to do on this planet.
Yeah, you're talking about creating a breakaway civilization, which is what the ancients talk about doing. They talked about creating a breakaway civilization. You had some sections of the planet that had super advanced, high-level technological civilizations that reached the golden age, and you had some people on a part of the planet still living in caves, trying to group hunt mammoths, at the same time. So, I mean, it seemed like this cycle.
Yes, different societies don't progress at the same rate. And it is true that most of the cradles of civilization happened in a relatively narrow band of the earth, usually along rivers.
Cycle that exists. One thing I'll say with the wave conjugations, can you break that down a little bit deeper? How do you initiate the wave conjugation, or is something that's already propagating through space-time?
These are I call them these are the dark matter. The wave conjugations actually be the ether. What we've defined is the ether that they had.
What are my thoughts on P versus NP being undecidable? I actually think it is decidable, but I think better than mine will get to it. And basically, here's the way I think it's eventually going to be solved, because it's a set theory problem, essentially. We don't know if the two sets are equal or if P is a proper subset of NP. So there are two ways we can solve it. The difficult one is to either show that all algorithms that are currently in NP can be reduced using a simple technique to polynomial time, which has negative implications for cryptography. And I just did not pronounce cryptography very well. But I think what's more likely is we will find some problem in NP that cannot be reduced to polynomial time, and that will show that P and NP are not the same, and P is a proper subset of NP.
Did their very best to make go away, because the Michelson-Morley experiment that they did in 1887, the same people reconducted that experiment 20 years later, and they were able to detect the ether. But that information wasn't published, or widespread, didn't become widespread. Why? Because they had taken the walk down quantum electrodynamics, and they didn't want to reverse their thing. But
you don't know how badly I want to make a reference to Onyx Path Publishing's Mage the Ascension right now, but unfortunately, no one would know what the Council of Ether is. Oh,
This video is sponsored by...
Let's go back. We're gonna skip ahead.
Ever our voices
recognize pixel to pixel. And are you saying something similar?
Forces meet, what happens where 8 meet, what happens where 6 meet, what happens where 12, or what happens where 24, all these natural folds that occur within the etheric world that we become the effects of.
The ether has been long disproven.
We're living the effects of these things, and the way, and the all shapes, the mirrored all shapes, the ones that expand out, they represent the dark energy that everything else is moving its way through.
Dark energy is just a whimsical name we're giving to the repulsive force that shows the universe is expanding faster than we can account for. And a physicist can explain this far better than I can.
So they're okay with understanding only 4% of the universe and 96% of it being dark and mysterious. Whereas we don't have that problem. The breakaway civilization that we're starting, it understands.
Geez, now I want to talk about P versus NP.
And linchpin, it's a great tangential flight vehicle, but it's so.
Will you please explain what tangential flight means at any point? Now, a tangent can mean two things. It's either a ratio used in trigonometry, or it's a straight line that's touching something. Neither of those makes sense in this context.
Much more than that. That was low-hanging fruit for that application, and even for the other patents. I don't think that there's any government on this planet that has any of the technology and the capabilities that
Of course they don't. They have technology that works.
we have. And I'm glad that they don't. I'm very glad that
that's amazing, because when you talk about, we're talking about the
Yes, I would really hate for our military technology to be based on anything you have made, Terrence Howard.
ether and this dark matter. Professor Sylvester James Gates Jr., he's a former scientific advisor to Obama when he was in office. He's a professor at the University of Maryland. He discovered these Adinkra codes. So he was looking at Adinkra symbols from the Dogon tribe, which is out of Mali, Africa. And he said, he presupposed, what if these were three-dimensional objects? And so as he turned these things into three-dimensional objects, he began to recognize mathematical equations in some of the formulas he had been looking into in supersymmetry. And these mathematical equations, according to him, and these
Actually, that should not surprise me, because I still have a hard time with the unit circle remembering what it represents sometimes.
mathematicians that he put together on this super team, they discovered that these equations were error correcting codes hidden within the Adinkra codes. And
No, they are not error correcting codes. I don't know where you learned that bit of technology, but error correcting codes are used on certain types of memory to make it slightly more mature. Geez, I'm talking like you now. More secure. What it is a bit that can be checked to see if the data sent from the memory chip was accurate. If that bit doesn't match what the computer is expecting, the computer processes it in a way that it knows that data was wrong and asks for it to be resent. And I just explained that one terribly too.
codes were the same exact error correcting codes as search engines and web browsers. And that's what.
Oh my. Please learn something about technology before talking about it.
Running the ether of space-time itself. So in some way, shape, or form, the method of creation.
All right, I'm going to Google something quickly, because there may indeed be error correcting codes used by search engines, but I think he's getting confused. between the technology used all right, so yeah, it's not used by search engines. It's used for data transmission to make sure the video, or rather the data set, is correct.
Which is why I wrote the book Fractal Holographic Universe. Within that method of this creation, it seems to be a code running that's driving everything. Have you been able to see that, or have you been able to experiment, or through these?
Yeah, the point is that the error correction he's talking about really isn't used the way he says it is. Now, it would not surprise me if there's error correction in networking technologies because they've been used a long time in modems, and we're using essentially wider networks now that don't go over voice lines. But it's not used by search engines. It's used at the data link layer of the OSI model.
These wave conjugations of the flower life, have you been able to detect anything to that effect?
Well, one of the things that Eric brought up with the linchpin, he was like, there's an error in here. There's a mistake in here. And that was the 109.47 angle instead of the 108-degree angle. But what he didn't realize is that's the area.
No, I think what you didn't realize was he was saying that in engineering, approximations are often used that aren't necessarily correct. So your math error didn't matter.
That the universe breathes through. There's always a hole there. There's an area that there's no matter or mass that's allowed to congregate or to collect in these spaces. And these are natural vents. These are the same vents that the Birkeland currents run from, you know, and that's that plasma that runs through our universe. These areas are necessary. It's the breakdown of symmetry that allows there to have the grand.
All right, I need to come back and address something. The thinking among most computer science is that P does not equal NP because there are just too many problems in NP.
Symmetry. You have to have some kind of break in it, and that's what the linchpin does. That's why I say it's the constitution between the micro, the electric micro, or the plasmic electric micro, and the magnetic radiative expansive thing. This is the communication board between it. It's an error correcting code. So it ties directly in with what you just said.
Yeah.
And that's it, but it's not a mistake, it's a necessity.
Right.
There has to be a breakdown and there has to be a rebuild. You got to blow everything out in order to get.
If Jim Gates has solved P versus NP, I eagerly await for someone to announce he's won the Millennium Prize for solving that problem.
The next breath in there, and there's a moment in which there's no breathing.
Yeah, this is powerful stuff. I mean, because, you know, and through this, and I'm working on some documents about this. Now, I was talking earlier before you got on about light, how a photon doesn't go from point A to point B, that it propagates from pixel to pixel. And are you seeing something similar with this?
I am pretty sure light does not have pixels the same way a computer screen does.
With the way the universe works from your perspective?
Well, light doesn't travel. That's what I'm noticing, that it doesn't travel.
Light doesn't travel? It almost certainly does. Are you going to denigrate Einstein now the same way you've been trashing the memory of Euclid?
It's the energy is being reproduced.
Yes.
It's reproducing itself. There's a sexual mating that's taking.
So, not only have we learned from Terrence Howard that carbon is bisexual, I don't know what he meant by that, but he did indeed say it. We now learn that energy can do sexual mating.
In place with each waveform, there's a whole nother generation. Light is behaving that way, and we don't even see light. Light, we've never seen light.
We don't. Well, I think that's technically correct, but not for the reasons he's going to explain.
Right, we just see the effects of it reflected on things, but we've never been able to see the light. You know, it's a much darker or denser state, you know, but that I've had the privilege of actually being able to patent, you know, and put aside. And I'm.
Wait, did he just say he patented light?
like, okay, well, I can't share this with everybody because with it, you'll end up being able to really create some harm, but it's that final state of matter. But light, they used to say that light behaved, what you could picture it the same way you picture a motion picture. Each film, each moment is captured, and then when shown on a screen or in a stream, it looks like one action, but it's actually a number of little bitty actions. No,
Oh, for heaven's sakes, that is the worst explanation of how movies work that I have ever heard. How can an actor not know that each frame of a movie is a separate picture? It even works the same for the YouTube videos we make.
prospect of what we call light, is actually the shadow of an energy, of a greater energy. We're seeing the shadow of it in this thing. We're the condensation of what's taking place in the dark matter and dark energy. Our entire existence, our entire universe is just a condensation. It's just a balancing between two different pressure conditions. So our illusion of what we see and call light, is nowhere near the nature of it, because since so many creatures in the universe feed off of light, then you have to understand, since you can't live.
So many creatures in the universe feed off of light. I think he's referring to plants, and to say plants feed off of light would be incorrect. Plants use light to make food, that is correct.
Living things cannot eat dead things.
Living things cannot eat dead things? Please tell that to every single animal that eats carrion. And I'm pretty sure most of the stuff we buy from the grocery store is dead, or we wouldn't be eating it.
A person can't eat a concrete brick and get the nutrients from it. He can only eat living things. So since so many creatures feed from light itself directly, wouldn't light have to be alive?
Yeah, absolutely.
What?
I talk about all the time that everything is actually alive in this energetic universe, right? Everything is alive. And what you said before was so interesting about the shadow, that we're seeing the effect. And, there's some scientists in a laboratory a few years back were able to reproduce an 8th dimensional quasi-crystal. And when they pointed this quasi-crystal in a particular angle, it cast down the shadow of a 4th dimensional quasi-crystal. And when they tilted that in a particular angle, it cast.
Well, it's been a while since I had someone just say something that bizarre. And Terrence Howard claiming he patented light was something I did not expect.
Down a sphere, which they believe is actually our universe. From an as above, so below. That's the micro, but on the macro scale.
I don't know where you're getting the idea of an 8th dimensional crystal, or that a scientist made it in a lab.
Potentially, they believe something like this could be happening, that this universe could be the shadow of a higher dimension or higher dimensional things going on. And it's kind of interesting, you bring up the fact that with the photons and everything else, almost like we're living in the shadow. It's interesting that these theoretical physicists had come up with the same idea or similar concept based on quasi-crystals and the shadows that they actually cast. It gave them.
And we all know you're an expert on physics, Billy.
An inkling that maybe we are living in the shadow of a higher dimension, which is just mind-boggling. But I love this stuff because it's so cool to even try to wrap your mind.
All right, let's give you a little clue here. When physicists talk about multiple universes, they're not talking about dimensions.
And around this kind of information. And so it's just incredible.
I mean, look at us. Here we are, contained in this flesh. And we identify with this flesh, where this is, it's like we have a Range Rover. It's like if I identified with the Range Rover as being me, but we're living and existing inside of this strange world. When you see a car driving down the street or an old truck flatbed and there's a chain hanging from it, the motion is going in this direction, but the sparks are going in the opposite direction.
Well, not being someone with a math degree, I'm pretty sure higher dimensions is meaningless. It's just more dimensions than 3.
It's the sparks aren't flying in the same direction that the thing is in. If sparks are flying in the complete opposite direction, that's how I believe that light behaves. What we're seeing the energy that we're seeing the energy is gone over here. We're seeing its shadow. We're seeing the leftover of it.
Right.
You know, we're participating in that leftover part of it because that light, and that's the true nature of the creator. That's the true nature of who we are, and that's why we identify with it. And one day we'll be done with these bodies, you know, and we'll be able to see ourselves and like, oh wow, I'm not just, you know, I don't only just see 0.005% of one half.
Listen, I spent most of the day trying to wrap my mind around Bayes' theorem. I don't need your bad math to make things worse, Mr. Howard.
With 1% of the total spectrum, I can now experience the entire thing. And then we'll wonder what we'll want to be flesh again. Because there's something interesting about things that you can do with the flesh. You know, I like being married. I like being touch my wife. You know, but I would love to become a spiritual being again. I would love to get back there, but let me finish the work I got to do here now. You know, maybe there's a bridge. I can't wait to see you and show you some of these incredible things. I was hoping I would be able to do it tonight, but I thought it was 8 o'clock.
Oh man, that's okay. What we're gonna do is we're gonna hop back on. Maybe even be able to do this in a much.
Well, Mr. Howard, the next time you need to remember how much time difference there is between the East Coast and the West Coast, just multiply 1 times 1 times 1 using your math.
Nicer setting and give the people a high. I'm glad we could do it high fidelity, high quality when we get to going through your stuff, and I want them to see it in a way that they've never seen it before and give you the respect that you deserve showing it.
Mr. Carson, I actually have given Terrence Howard a little bit more than the respect he deserves for this. I do appreciate that he is trying to think about math. I just wish he understood it.
And to be able to allow you to make your point, get your point across, and teach and share the knowledge.
As someone who has taught, Mr. Howard does not belong in a classroom. Not even as a substitute teacher whose primary job is to make sure the students do not kill each other.
In a way that hasn't been done yet. So everything happens in divine time. So don't worry, it's definitely going to happen. You know, and when you were talking about the it was something you were just talking about that really just sparked my brain for a second there on another topic. But it'll come back to me in a second because it was really huh?
It wasn't the spark going in the opposite direction?
That's what it was. Yes, thank you. So, you know, a lot of people think that when they see something, even the screen they're looking at us on right now, they think that they're seeing us in real time. But
no, I don't, because I understand that it still takes some time for the light from my monitor to reach my eyes. I'm seeing whatever that image displayed a few fractions of a second ago.
But they're not seeing us in real time, and you can't see anything in real time because the time it takes for the photon to ping off of the object and then hit the retina, go to the back of the brain and get deciphered, the thing has already moved, right? So what you're seeing is the past. We're always looking at the past. We know when we look up at the night sky, we're looking into the past. But when we look at anything, that even our hands, we're looking at our hands as they were, not as they are. And so, yes, you're right about that. When, you know, the spark, the truck is going that way and the sparks are going that way, we're not seeing things as they actually are in the moment, even through quantum encryption. The reason why quantum encryption is so good.
Let me check something for a second, because that may be a thing, but I think he's getting confused. Because quantum computing is not practical yet. Oh, yes. Okay, quantum encryption is a thing.
Good is because at the quantum level, I mean, in order for you to find out, you know, whether an atom is spin rate up or spin rate down, you've got to ping a photon off of that atom. And once you do that, the spin rate changes. So that's why quantum encryption is so incredible. So we're not experiencing real time as we think we are. There is always seems to be a slight delay.
Yeah. And if they understood how the universe behaves, how things, the ratio by which things contract in comparison to the ratio by which things expand, if they were able to.
And if you took time to figure out if that particular, I guess it's not a binomial, expression did indeed equal 5. You are a math nerd.
To apply those things in there, they would have an opportunity to be present in the moment. But what it will ultimately do is it actually pulls you out. And that's what I was talking about, being able to decouple and get to that space where you're not affected by any other forces. That's when you're able to fully utilize the universe as a whole. And
oh, for heaven's sake. When I am at rest and not moving, I am still affected by all the forces acting upon me. It's just that the forces are in equilibrium. Please learn high school physics.
the technology, you know,
Yeah.
it's quite possible, but you have to, you literally have to climb out of Plato's cave. You got to stop looking at the shadows. You got to stop believing all the banging of the drums and all of these things. You got to stop being afraid of the boogeyman. You know, you got to face God and stop lying to yourself. Stop singing the hymns, you know.
Speaking of lying to yourself, Mr. Howard, it's time to accept that the square root of 2 is an irrational number and that 1 times 1 equals 1, because that's how multiplication of 1 is defined. The identity property is not racist. And it's not just the identity property, it's the identity property of multiplication.
Have a nice conversation with the true God and find the truth within yourself. And the stuff that you know is BS, you've got to be man enough to say this is some BS because it's there to help control you. Find the divinity in you, keep moving, keep challenging yourself. Like I just finished doing this job in Puerto Rico. It was a great opportunity to be there. But I'm there and I'm realizing these people, this is the Caribbean Palestine. They have never been allowed to vote. They have no vote in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Wait, what? That's not even accurate. They have definitely been allowed to vote in Puerto Rico. They are allowed to vote in our presidential elections. I think what you mean is because they are not a state, they have some sort of weird setup where they're not actually allowed to vote on legislation in Congress, even though they have a representative there.
They cannot ship anything into Puerto Rico. They can't, even though Dominica is right next to it, or Haiti is right next to it, or St. Martin. They cannot trade.
Puerto Rico is an island, you jackass. Haiti and the Dominican Republic are right next to each other, sure. And I don't believe they're far from each other, but Puerto Rico is not next to Haiti and the Dominican Republic.
Everything, if they had a boat that was coming to Puerto Rico, it has to stop in Miami, unload everything in Miami, and then load it back onto the boat, and then send it to Puerto Rico. It's called the Jones Act, and in place for.
I don't think that's what the Jones Act is. Let's look that up, because I do recall that there was a ship called the El Faro that did not do that when it sunk because the captain sailed it into a hurricane in 2015. But let's look up what the Jones Act actually says. And let's not use Google's AI. All right, that's not helpful. What can I find here? The Jones Act. All right. What does it say? It requires that cargo is to be shipped solely aboard vessels that are U.S. built, U.S. citizens owned, and registered in the U.S., which means crewed by Americans. So, yes, it's just basically between ports in the U.S. If you're trading along ports in the U.S. to different ports in the U.S., you have to use an American crewed and American flagged vessel. It doesn't do anything that he's saying.
60 years. It takes away self-determination. It takes away any ability to grow. And these are people that were slaves. They're all descendants from slaves, and they're still.
I believe that's largely true in Haiti and the Dominican Republic, but not Puerto Rico.
people sitting here in an apartheid state, without half of their municipal buildings have not been restored since the Hurricane Maria.
Puerto Rico is not an apartheid state, but yes, if you're talking about Hurricane Maria, I believe they are suffering negative effects from the failures of the Trump administration specifically to get aid to them in a timely manner.
Hurricane Maria. No, you're absolutely right, because part of my family is Puerto Rican, and everything you said is 1,000% accurate.
Yeah, these people, they have no voice. And this.
Should I point out that nothing can be more than 100% accurate?
This is okay. The U.S. is parading about like this is okay. These are people of African descent, and it shows you the state of our world. And everyone, like I keep telling them, they got to.
Again, Puerto Ricans are Hispanic.
You've got to stand up. You can't ask for becoming a state. You got to demand it or demand independence.
Oh, for heaven's sakes. Plenty of people would love to see Puerto Rico become a state. The reason why it hasn't become a state is a lot more complicated than we are oppressing Puerto Rico.
Independence, and if I was them, I would demand independence. But we are all in that apartheid state. Like I just told you, they tried to cancel out my passport. First, it was getting canceled.
Puerto Rico, a U.S. territory, tried to cancel your passport. Did you even think before you said that?
So because they said it was child support payment, and I was like, dude, it's.
Oh, okay. They isn't referring to Puerto Rico. Okay, got it.
They're all grown, and my ex-wife has 2-3 homes. They're all, and then it was like, oh, it's delinquent tax, and so I got that paid, and now it's still sitting there. They just don't want you to leave the plantation to go and benefit someone else. You know, they'll rather lock you in, and so now I got to escape America. Yeah. I got to get on the Underground Railroad to find a place where I can grow this tree,
Yeah,
and
they don't want you to take your knowledge to another country and then they actually jump on it and start utilizing some of the information to build different types of technologies. That's what the real problem is.
Yeah, they want you to die and they get to take it because you patent thing in here, and that's not going to happen. Now I put all the patents to a church, and that's the TCOTLC. It's the Center for Truth and Consciousness. That's what the TCOTLC means. And so I put all of the side of there so that the board members are able to dictate who gets applications and who doesn't. Israel wanted to license linchpin a year and a half ago, and I had to say no. I had to say no because of I'm not in line with a lot of their activities. Some really good people, but good people make mistakes too.
That's true. That's an absolute fact. Listen, man, it's so much we can talk about. I mean, I love to even get into some spirituality. The more I looked into the ancient civilizations, one thing I recognized was that not only were they highly advanced technologically, but also they seemed to be very highly advanced spiritually. They had, in my opinion, combined spirituality with technology. And that would make anyone seem to be omnipotent and omniscient, as some of the texts that I've read, which made it into some of these more canonized texts, like the Bible and other religious texts, these beings appear to be God-like, but not really being God. Now, I believe that you...
So they're the Q in Star Trek. Awesome.
You and I both believe in God. I've heard you say it many times, right? I believe in God. You believe in God. We believe there's a creator of the universe. Now, what I've learned and through my studies is that in a lot of ways that the creator of the universe that's being talked about in some of these texts might not be the one that we think it is. And I think that you're right. I think there's a lot, everything that man touches is corrupted. And I think there's a lot of texts that have come up that have been remixed and put out in a way where it becomes dogma and holds us back. One thing I heard some scientists talking about on the Discovery Channel years ago was about the fact that they were looking into the Arabs, and they were Muslims, and they were looking into their scientific advancements in the late 1700s to the early 1800s. And they realized something incredible. They saw that if it wasn't for the papal inquisitions, which created a lot of slaughter and murder, that they believe that the Arabs would have been on the moon in the 1800s.
No, they do not. advanced rocketry technology did not exist until the 20th. And while it is true that the Arab world was once the height of Western learning, it was not during the 17th and 18th century. It was during, between the 8th and 12th centuries, if I remember correctly. And there are a lot of words that we use, like alcohol, algorithm, and algebra, that have their roots in Arabic languages.
So to paint a picture, what I'm trying to say, this dogma has really held us back from becoming who we truly are meant to be. It's held us back and robbed our birthright, and we're scratching and clawing our way back out of this hole, trying to get back to who we truly are as people. I believe that we're going to get there because of people like yourself and many others that have courage. It's just a problem.
As someone who used to think she was bad at math and then had to go back to college and learn algebra, I can say I was once not quite as bad at math as Terrence Howard is, but he does have to learn basic math before he can contribute anything more, and that's why he isn't going anywhere with this. Math takes practice, it takes time, and in my case, it was just more a mental block because I had bad experiences with two teachers relatively close together. But then, after I went back to college and realized, hey, computer science is math, and hey, there are certain types of math I'm actually not bad at, my attitude slightly changed.
Process that in some ways, man, it's just like, it's such a slow, arduous process, but I believe it is happening on a very small scale, little by little.
Yeah, like whatever happened to me to get me to this place, I'm so happy for it. I'm happy for all of the trials and tribulations. I'm happy for being kicked out of the world. I'm happy for the misunderstandings because it made me dig deeper into my instincts.
Well, hopefully, Mr. Howard, someday you will realize the misunderstandings that have gotten you so much attention are your own.
Ancestral past, the place that I know is true, not the hopes that I want to go to, but where I've come from. And if everyone can tap into that place, that what you said about those advanced civilizations, they were spiritual and technologically advanced. We call that art. All those things are expressions of art, of artistry. And the moment that you start playing with it, putting it into play, like this last project that's what I'm talking about over in Puerto Rico, one of the things that I ended up doing is for this one,
Well, from that could apply to the probability class I'm taking.
I was like, I'm going to write with my left hand for this one. I'm just going to allow you to write all my.
Listen, if you're expecting me to be impressed by you writing left-handed, well, maybe you should talk to someone who isn't left-handed.
Spanish stuff with my left hand and put that into play. And there's other projects where I write with my left hand or my right hand and I'll do it backwards. But each one of those challenges, what it's doing is it's strengthening my brain. What I found when I switched from right hand to left hand, my brain reversed its chemistry. It had a different kind of line of thought. But then when I switch from writing forwards to backwards in either hand, it ends polarizing it. So
I have never had that experience, and I frequently write backwards just because it doesn't cause the ink or lead to smear.
now there's 4 individuals that's sitting there watching with an expectation of how something should be written, how it should be played out. And you realize that these are different personalities within you, but actually different DNA series or different people from, my.
What do you mean by DNA series? Mr. Howard, there is something you are basically missing here that I think is important. There is more genetic diversity in a tribe of West African chimps than there is in the entire human species at the moment. And this isn't because there were 2 genetic bottlenecks, one 6,000 years ago and another one people got off the ark, which would indeed go a long way to proving those stories. But if such genetic bottlenecks occurred, humanity probably would have died out. There was one about 70,000 years ago that is connected to the eruption of Toba in Indonesia, where about 10,000 people lived on the earth.
my mother, my father, my grandmother, my grandfather, whoever they are. But you give them a voice because one of them may have been left-handed. One of them may have been, like when you mentioned Mali or the Dogon people, my 21%.
Well, being left-handed does give me a different way of thinking. It doesn't make me higher spiritually. It just means I have to approach the world as a left-handed person. This is the same thing for any group we belong to that isn't quite the majority.
Of me is Mali, and another 20% is Benin Toga. We're actually, my people are from Timbuktu, actually. Wow. So it's that rich.
Yes, impressive, but it doesn't really mean much for anything here. It would be like saying, I'm descended from Swiss Mennonites. It is interesting, sure, but it doesn't say anything about my abilities.
History. We can all draw into it, but everyone has to find the God inside, or it's like what they said about Paris. You know, unless you take Paris with you, you'll never see it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have some expectation of it, and you have to see it in yourself. And that's why I'm so proud of what you've done. And, you know, you've stood by me throughout this entire process, and it's been rough. And I really appreciate your forbearance and your patience with me, Billy. You know, it really meant a lot. And I hope that we can continue to grow together. Dr. Jeff Menzies was the one that was responsible for me actually getting out here and talking to the scientific community, because I had already said that there was nothing coming from it, that it wasn't going anywhere. And he's a professor that I met in somewhere in the Mideast. Mm-hmm. But he really encouraged me to get this stuff out there. And
Mr. Howard, aren't you the same person who said on Joe Rogan's podcast that Kurt Gödel was working on the identity property? Now, I tried to look that up, and if someone does know that he was, let me know. But I'm pretty sure what Kurt Gödel is known for is his incompleteness theorem. I also know that John von Neumann was, in fact, writing a letter where he described what would become the P versus NP problem to him that was not published until after his death.
For all the hits that it takes, great, you know, but there's truth. There's all truth. And if there's any.
Well, we do have one admission that he smokes crack, but I don't think he was serious. And I just lost my USB device. That's good. Come on. Come back on, mouse. There we go.
Lie, you know, don't throw it away.
Yeah.
You know, but they wouldn't have given me the patents if they were BS.
Right. That's a fact. Listen, man, it's an honor to have you on here. I really appreciate you. You know, against all odds, we get.
Please keep in mind that there are things that cannot be patented. Ideas cannot be patented. They can be copyrighted. Processes can be patented. Books cannot be patented. And shapes most certainly cannot be.
Got you on. And, you know, I'm just hoping, like you said, that we can build something together and we can set up something else and do another thing and bring more to people.
Let's do this again next week, but I want to bring my CTO on and we can talk through. So I'm not just talking about the wave conjugations and the mirrored all shapes. I can actually show them. That's the point of it. That's what I would love to be able to do. But it was really nice just to be able to talk and give voice. And I appreciate Joe Rogan for bringing me on. I appreciate Eric for coming up there. I appreciate Brian Keating for still talking about me, you know, and Piers Morgan and all of them. What I don't appreciate, though, is, you know, when you have the truth in front of you and when you push it aside, you're not actually pushing that person that's delivering it aside. You know, it wasn't me that they were rejecting. They were rejecting the person that gave this knowledge to me. It was for their benefit, their edification. So you reject it if you want, but the people that care about their future, you know, look up the book, look at the wave conjugations, learn how to make them yourself, and you won't need any teacher.
Yeah, absolute facts. And
You won't need any teacher. Mr. Howard, you most definitely need a teacher. The problem is you think you can teach other people basic math when you don't know it. I'm sure you could teach me things about acting because I'm not an actor. I'm sure you've had life experiences that I have not had that I could learn from about you. But you're going to have to accept that even though I don't claim to be a great expert, I have had more formal training in math than you. It's kind of necessary to get a computer science degree.
Seen some of your inventions actually working on some of our private talks, and it's amazing. It's mind-blowing stuff. So we'll come back on, we'll hit you up, we'll set up on another live, and we'll bring the wave conjugations to the people so they can wrap their minds around some more incredible knowledge. And so thank you again for coming on, man. I know you persevered. You're getting eaten up by bugs out there. It's hot and everything else, man. You're walking around the yard. I appreciate you, man. You're a real hero, man.
Yeah, that's you. And I appreciate you, like I said, for sticking with me.
Yeah.
That means everything. Thank your wife for the time. This means a lot. And I look forward, like I said, next week I'm good. Let's do this again and actually walk them through the stuff and walk through the patterns. That's what it's necessary. So they can, because there's things that they can use. And what you mentioned earlier about potentially open sourcing these things, some of these things, I would really love to talk about.
I don't think you know what open source is.
You know, how that can benefit. I just don't want it to be misused.
Yeah, gotcha. We just got to brainstorm. Once we brainstorm, all kind of incredible ideas will come to us from the universe, man, and we can put something together that protects us, but also helps the world,
Happy birthday next week on the 4th, man.
Hey, thank you, brother. Appreciate it, man. Forbidden knowledge on the 4th. Thank you, man. I'll be 53.
Yeah, man. I'm Devil Nichols, man. So we're doing it right.
Yeah, yes, sir. Absolutely. All right. We'll see you next week, man.
All right, later, bro.
All right, peace. All right, guys.
Okay, well, I will say Billy Carson does look good for his age. And that is as much of that podcast as we are going to cover. Now, I know I've been harsh on Terrence Howard, and not without reason. But if you think he has anything relevant to say on the subject of math, he does not. Math proofs do not invoke conspiracy theories. Go read his 1 × 1 = 2 proof. It's full of bad algebra and irrelevant ramblings. It's hilarious, but it's not a good math proof. In fact, it's probably the equivalent of some proofs I wrote for my discrete structures class. And it's very easy to just say, oh, maybe you just don't understand them. It's like, no, I do understand the stuff that actually means something, and he's just wrong about those things. A lot of what he's saying is just meaningless because he's getting things from different fields wrong. If you go through and listen to his original Joe Rogan podcast, he talks about chemistry, physics, and math, and engineering, and he's wrong in many different ways about all of those subjects. When Eric Weinstein came on, I thought it would be a better way of showing everyone that Terrence Howard didn't know what he was talking about. Unfortunately, Eric Weinstein tried to play nice because he was trying to sponge Terry Howard fans into his own audience. What he needed to do was show Terrence Howard that he was wrong. Maybe not aggressively, but assertively. And just telling Terrence Howard that 1 × 1 doesn't equal 2 was not far enough. I hope Terrence Howard does learn basic math someday. I hope he realizes that he's been wrong about this, and I hope I'm wrong about what I think the issue is here. With that being said, it's easy to laugh at people like this, but remember, Terrence Howard does have the courage to go out and publicly be wrong on the internet in a very public and, some would say, embarrassing way. So let's try to exercise some compassion and be as nice as we can be, even if what he's saying is hilarious. Have a good night, everyone, and go out and write some code. And I should check to make sure that the homework file I emailed myself is ready so I can upload it to Canvas.